The cold that morning was not the kind you simply endure. It was the kind that moved in quietly, found a seat inside your bones, and stayed there. Every breath burned, turning white in the air before it vanished. The park lay empty, as if the weather had signed an agreement with the city to keep everyone home. The grass was crisp with frost, the benches frozen in place, the trees stripped bare and leaning like old men huddled against the wind. Even the pond at the far end was locked under a thin layer of ice that cracked softly if you listened hard enough. That was when I noticed her. She stood near the far path, next to a fallen oak that had been rooted there for decades. At some point in the night it had lost its battle with the earth, toppling sideways with enough force to tear the ground open. The roots jutted upward like a frozen wave, a tangle of soil, and would now stiff with frost. The trunk blocked the path entirely, splintered at the base where it had snapped. She had one hand deep in her coat pocket and the other gripping the leash of a German shepherd mix, a big animal with thick fur and eyes that missed nothing. The dog's tail was low, his ears working constantly, scanning the air for sounds or scents. Every so often he would step forward and stop, staring in the same direction his owner seemed to be watching. I have seen that kind of stillness before. It is not the calm of someone enjoying a quiet winter morning. It is the stillness of someone who is listening, someone who knows they are not as alone as they appear. The path ahead curved out of sight beyond the trees. She kept looking at it, then back to the oak, then to the frozen ground near its roots. The dog gave a low rumble in his chest and froze, head tilted. My eyes followed his line of attention and found it, a patch of pale color against the dark soil. At first I thought it was a glove, stiffened by the frost. Then I saw the shape of the fingers, the faint curve of a nail. I called it in. A fallen tree, a body part, and a witness who was either very lucky or very unlucky. Normally this is where the process begins to roll forward with practiced precision. Secure the area, wait for the forensics team, let them work their science while the uniforms keep the scene clean. But that morning, the chain of efficiency snapped. The lead criminalist on rotation, Hank Alvarez, was nowhere to be found. Hank was a veteran, the kind of guy who could kneel beside a patch of dirt and tell you the weather, the time, and who had been standing there. I trusted his instincts more than half the lie detectors I had ever worked with. When he didn't answer his phone, dispatch kept trying until they finally reached him. By then it had been 20 minutes since my call. He had left his house with his gear bag, heading toward the park, when his phone rang. His daughter's school was on the line. She had collapsed during gym class. An ambulance was already taking her to the hospital. Hank turned his car around and never looked back. Now he was sitting in a waiting room with his phone silent in his pocket, staring at a wall and waiting for a doctor to appear. We got a replacement, but it was a rookie tech barely 6 months in. He was young enough that his breath still showed more inexperience than cold, fumbling with his camera, asking me twice how to photograph frost patterns. Every minute that passed meant the cold was hardening the body, wiping away the finer details. The frost was claiming the scene in the same way the tide takes the shore, slow but unstoppable. The girl still hadn't moved. If anything, she seemed more anchored to that spot than the tree itself. Her dog shifted, restless, but she held the leash short. I noticed her eyes weren't just watching the tree or the curve in the path. They were watching me as well, measuring how close I would get, how much I would ask. There was a guardedness there that went beyond shock. The rookie was still unpacking his kit when the dog barked, a single sharp sound that cut through the cold air and then stopped. His gaze was locked on the curve of the path again. The girl murmured something under her breath and tightened her grip. I stepped closer to the tree's roots. The frost crackled under my boots. The pale shape was unmistakable now. Fingers stiffened by the cold, skin the color of porcelain, partially buried in frozen soil. I felt the weight in my stomach settle heavier. This was not going to be a quick scene, and the longer we stood there without Hank, the more the case began slipping through our hands. Then the girl spoke, her voice low, flat, as if she was talking to herself. She said the tree had not been there the night before. She had walked past this exact spot with the dog just before dark, and the path had been clear. Which meant the fall, and whatever was buried in the frost, had happened sometime in the hours between. There was something in the way she said it that made me feel she was leaving more unsaid than spoken. And that was enough to make me realize this was no ordinary start to a case. The rookie tech was moving at the pace of a funeral procession. Every adjustment to his tripod seemed to take a minute, every photograph another 2. His gloves were too thick, making him clumsy, but the cold wouldn't forgive bare hands. He was already shivering, and it wasn't just the weather. You could tell he had never been this close to death before, not without a wall of paperwork between them. The girl stayed put, standing back from the scene but not far enough for me to stop noticing her. I had given her the standard line, "Stay where you are, don't touch anything, we'll need to ask you some questions," but she seemed glued to the spot long before I spoke. The dog shifted in place, ears twitching, sniffing the frozen air. Every so often he looked at me, then back at the path. It was as if he was trying to tell me something, and I was too slow to understand. We were still waiting on backup. The patrol unit assigned to block off the northern entrance to the park had gotten tied up in a traffic accident on the main road. One thing after another, the morning felt like a chain of small delays, nothing huge, but enough to gnaw at my nerves. I finally walked over to the girl, moving slow so the dog wouldn't see me as a threat. Up close, I could see her cheeks were red from the cold, but her eyes were clear and steady. I asked her name. She hesitated, then gave it. No last name, just a first. She told me she came through here twice a day, morning and evening, walking the dog. Last night, she said, the tree had been upright, the path clear. This morning, the tree was down, and the pale thing half buried in the frost was there. I asked her if she had seen anyone around. She shook her head, but it was the kind of shake that feels too quick, too practiced. I made a note in my head, not that she was lying, but that she might be leaving something out. Behind me, the rookie was finally crouched over the body. He was careful not to disturb the frost, leaning in to take close-up shots. I watched him, partly because I didn't fully trust his work, and partly because I didn't like turning my back to the girl just yet. He froze, not from the cold, but from whatever he had just seen. I stepped over and looked. The hand was attached to an arm, the arm to a shoulder, and the rest of the body lay under the tree's roots and frozen soil. The face, when uncovered, was partly hidden by the angle, but enough showed to see it was male, maybe mid-30s. The skin was pale, not just from the frost, and the lips had a bluish tinge. There were no obvious signs of struggle, no torn clothing, no visible wounds. But there was something strange. The jacket looked too clean for someone supposedly pinned under a tree that had crashed to the ground. No splinters, no dirt stains, no branch scrapes. That meant one thing, he had been placed here after the tree had already fallen. The rookie looked at me, waiting for a cue. I told him to keep working, document everything, but not to move the body until we got someone with more experience on scene. He nodded, fumbling with his lens cap. The girl was watching us, not trying to hide it. She was standing in the exact same position as when I had first seen her, like she was part of the scenery. But her eyes, they were sharp, following every movement. I decided to ask her again if she had seen anyone in the park recently. This time, she took longer to answer. She said there had been a man near the pond 2 nights ago. She didn't get a good look at him, it was dark, he had a hood up, but she remembered the way he walked. Slow, deliberate, like he was counting his steps. Something about the details stuck in my mind. People don't remember the way strangers walk unless something about it bothered them. Before I could press her for more, the radio crackled in my ear. The traffic accident had cleared, the Northern Patrol was on its way, and they were bringing another forensic lead, not Hank, but a woman named Mitchell who had worked homicide scenes before moving into the lab. It would take her another 15 minutes to arrive. 15 minutes of standing in the cold, with a rookie trying not to mess up the photographs and a witness who seemed to be calculating every word she gave me. I glanced down at the body again. The man's eyes were closed, but something about the set of his jaw told me he hadn't died peacefully. And there, caught in the frozen soil beside him, was a fragment of something dark red. At first I thought it was a piece of fabric, maybe from his clothing. But when I crouched closer, I realized it was leather, the tip of a glove, torn clean off at the fingers. The girl was still watching. When I stood, her gaze flicked briefly to the glove fragment, then back to my face. That was when I knew she recognized it. I didn't say anything yet. But in that moment, I stopped seeing her as just a bystander. The cold was getting worse. It wasn't just sitting in the air anymore, it was pressing down on everything, squeezing the life out of it. The frost had turned sharper, the kind that made your boots slip if you weren't paying attention. I could feel it creeping up my legs, numbing my knees. The girl's breath was visible now in thick clouds, and the dog's fur had started to catch tiny white crystals along his back. Mitchell, the backup criminalist, was still nowhere to be seen. She'd left the lab half an hour ago. I called her cell, and she picked up on the third ring, breathless. She was stuck in the same mess of traffic Hank had hit earlier. Some jackknife delivery truck had shut down part of the road again. She'd be at least another 20 minutes. I told her to take it slow, no point rushing and ending up in a ditch. That left me with the rookie, the girl, and the body. And as much as I tried to keep my focus on the scene, there was something nagging at me. Someone else was in the park. I didn't hear them, but I saw the sign. A faint line of footprints cut through the snow about 30 yards past the fallen tree. They weren't old, the frost hadn't softened them yet, and the edges of each step were still sharp. The pattern was odd, long strides, narrow gait, someone walking fast but not running. And here's the thing, they didn't come from either entrance to the park. They started from the tree line itself, like the person had come in from the woods. The rookie hadn't noticed. He was too busy trying to take overhead shots without slipping on the frost. I didn't point the footprints out right away. Instead, I walked a slow circle around the scene, keeping one eye on the girl. She wasn't watching the rookie anymore. She was looking in the same direction as the footprints, her hand tightening on the leash every time the dog shifted toward them. It wasn't fear on her face, it was more like calculation. Like she knew what those prints meant. The wind shifted, carrying a faint sound. It could have been a branch snapping under weight, or it could have been someone stepping on frozen ground. Either way, I didn't like it. Just then, a figure appeared at the southern entrance of the park. Tall, bulky coat, carrying a coffee in one hand and a phone in the other. It was O'Donnell, a patrol officer I knew well enough to wish I didn't. He had a habit of showing up where he wasn't needed and slowing everything down with bad jokes and worse theories. He walked straight up to the tape line the rookie had strung and ducked under without a word. I told him this was a controlled scene. He grinned, said he was just here to help, and immediately started pacing too close to the body, leaving fresh boot prints in the frost. I asked him if he'd seen anyone on his way in. He said no, then launched into a story about a guy at the coffee shop spilling a latte on himself. While he talked, I kept glancing toward the tree line. The footprints were still there, and if the temperature kept dropping, they'd harden in place, but if snow started falling again, they'd be gone in minutes. I finally told O'Donnell to keep the perimeter and stop trampling my scene. He shrugged, muttered something about me being cranky, and wandered off. The girl watched the exchange without saying a word. The rookie called me over. He'd managed to get a clearer view of the body's position under the tree roots. Something about it bothered him, though he couldn't put it into words. I could. The angle was wrong. The way the torso was twisted didn't match a fall, it matched someone being dragged. The marks in the frozen soil confirmed it. Parallel grooves, about shoulder width apart, leading from the footprints toward the body. That was when the wind shifted again, colder than before, and the dog let out a low, sustained growl. Not at me, not at the rookie, at the trees. His ears were pinned, and his gaze didn't waver. I took a few slow steps toward the footprints. They led deeper into the tree line, where the frost thickened and the shadows seemed heavier. I didn't follow them yet. Not without backup. The radio on my belt crackled. It was dispatch, telling me Mitchell was 10 minutes out. I told them to tell her to come straight to my location, no detours. When I turned back, the girl was crouched beside her dog, whispering something in his ear. Not the usual soothing words you give a restless animal, more like instructions. The dog's gaze shifted from the trees to me, and then back again. O'Donnell had wandered too close to the footprints, his boots breaking their clean edges. I barked at him to get back. He raised his hands like I'd pulled a gun and stepped away, but the damage was done. The prints weren't ruined, but now they had fresh overlay, making it harder to see the finer details. The cold was biting deeper now, and a thin mist had started to creep across the ground from the pond. The scene felt tighter, like the park itself was closing in on us. Mitchell couldn't get here fast enough. By the time Mitchell arrived, the cold had settled in for good. The frost had thickened over the grass and branches, making the park look like it had been dipped in glass. Her SUV pulled up to the edge of the cordon, tires crunching over the frozen ground. She stepped out wearing a heavy coat and carrying a black case that looked like it could handle anything short of a fire. Mitchell was the kind of criminalist who didn't waste time with small talk. She gave me a quick nod, scanned the scene with sharp eyes, and went straight to the body. The rookie looked relieved, like a kid whose parent had just shown up to help with homework he didn't understand. I brought her up to speed: the fallen oak, the placement of the body, the strange lack of debris on the jacket, the partial glove in the soil, and the footprints leading toward the tree line. She listened without interrupting, just kept working, snapping photos, checking angles. When she was done with the immediate area, I led her to the footprints. The wind had been merciful, no new snow, just deeper cold, so the impressions were still sharp enough to read. She crouched, pulled out a small flashlight, and ran the beam along the edges. "Adult male," she said. "Heavy set, but not sluggish." The depth of the heel mark said he'd been moving quick, maybe even carrying weight. She traced the prints back toward the body, noting the parallel grooves in the soil where the victim had been dragged. I asked if she thought the man who left these prints was the same one who put the body here. Mitchell didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood, followed the line toward the tree line, and motioned for me to come along. The dog started barking the moment we got within 10 yards of the woods. The girl tried to hush him, but it was no use. His barks were sharp, urgent, not a warning bark, but the kind dogs use when they've found something they think you need to see. The footprints led us into the trees, where the frost grew thicker. The light was dim here, even though it was mid-morning. Branches overhead sagged under the weight of ice. The prints wound between the trunks, then stopped suddenly in a small clearing. At first, I thought the trail had simply ended. But then Mitchell pointed to a patch of disturbed frost ahead, faint impressions, like someone had stepped there and then deliberately brushed the ground to hide it. Whoever it was had taken their time erasing the evidence. We spread out, scanning the ground. That's when Mitchell called me over. Against the base of a thick pine, half hidden by fallen needles, was a canvas duffel bag. The zipper was half open, and inside were neatly folded clothes, men's clothes, dark colors, winter weight. On top of the pile was a pair of gloves. One of them was missing its fingertips. It wasn't much of a leap to match it to the fragment we'd found near the body. Mitchell photographed everything, then carefully sealed the bag for transport. I stood back, scanning the tree line. It felt wrong here, like someone had been watching us, and left just before we arrived. When we got back to the scene, O'Donnell was leaning on the tape, sipping his coffee. He asked if we'd found anything. I told him it was need to know, which didn't include him. He smirked like that was an answer in itself. The girl was still where we'd left her. The dog had stopped barking, but his eyes were fixed on the woods. When Mitchell walked past with the sealed duffel, the girl's gaze dropped to it for half a second, then back to me. No expression, no reaction, but something about her still didn't sit right. Mitchell went back to the body, dusting for trace evidence. The rookie handled the photos now that someone was watching him closely. I kept my eyes on the perimeter. The footprints in the woods were the only trail we had, and if they led anywhere, we'd need to move before the weather changed. The cold was sinking deeper now, making my fingers ache even through gloves. A thin layer of mist was curling low over the park, softening the outlines of everything. It made the girl and her dog look like they were standing in a dream, or a memory. Dispatch radioed in an update. They'd found a parked vehicle about a quarter-mile away, abandoned near the access road. No plates, no registration. Just a dented hood and a driver's door that didn't close all the way. It had fresh tire tracks in the frost leading toward the woods. Mitchell glanced at me. I didn't need her to say it. That car was probably how our mystery man got here, and maybe how he left. The problem was, we didn't know if he was still in the park. As the mist thickened, I started to feel the pressure in my gut. The kind of feeling you get right before something moves from strange to dangerous. And the worst part? The girl was still standing there, silent, waiting. It didn't feel like she was waiting for us to finish. It felt like she was waiting for someone to arrive. The mist had grown thick enough to hide the far end of the path. Even the frost seemed quieter now, muffling sound under its brittle skin. Mitchell was double-checking the bagged duffel while the rookie continued with the body shots, slower now, methodical. I stood a little apart, keeping my eyes on the woods. Then the dog stiffened. His head turned sharply toward the tree line, ears locked forward. The girl followed his gaze without moving a muscle. I stepped toward her, but she spoke first, low enough that I almost missed it. "He's here." I didn't ask who. My hand was already on the radio, signaling the 2 patrols on perimeter to watch the tree line. One responded immediately, the other came back with static. The fog shifted, not from the wind, but like something had passed through it. Then I saw a figure emerge from between the pines, walking slow, hands at his sides. Heavy-set, winter coat, hood down. His face was pale but not from the cold. He had the kind of expression you see in people who already know how this is going to end. He didn't look at me. He looked straight at the girl. The dog didn't bark. He just stood there, tense, like he was holding back for a signal. The man stopped a few feet from the tape, eyes flicking once to the body under the tree. Then he stepped forward, into the scene. I told him to stop. My voice carried, but he didn't break stride. Mitchell looked up, freezing mid-step. The rookie fumbled with his camera. O'Donnell, who had been leaning on the tape again, moved to block him, but the man just sidestepped like they weren't even in the same world. He came to stand next to the girl. Neither of them spoke. The dog's tail was low, his gaze bouncing between them. I told him again to stop moving, this time with my hand resting near my belt. That was when he finally looked at me. His eyes were sharp, steady, and in that one glance, I knew, this was the man who left the footprints. This was the man who dragged the body. Before I could say more, the girl knelt beside the dog, unclipped the leash, and whispered something. The dog trotted over to the man, brushed his leg with his head, and sat. The man turned back toward the trees, like he meant to leave the same way he'd come. But Mitchell stepped forward, voice firm, telling him he wasn't going anywhere. He paused, looking past her at the fallen oak. Then he said, clear enough for all of us to hear. "It wasn't supposed to be here." Mitchell asked what he meant. He didn't answer right away. Finally, he told us the tree had fallen days earlier, not last night, and that the body had been hidden beneath it on purpose. Not an accident. Not bad luck. Covered deliberately, using the tree as camouflage. The girl stayed silent, but her eyes were locked on him. Mitchell moved in to take him, and that's when the man's shoulders dropped. He didn't fight. Didn't run. He just raised his hands and let the cuffs click shut. As we walked him toward the road, he said the name of the victim, like it was a confession he'd been holding back. The name matched a missing persons report from a nearby town, a man last seen 3 nights ago, leaving work late. No signs of robbery, no history of trouble. The girl was still there when I came back. She hadn't moved, but her face had changed. Lighter somehow, as if she'd been carrying something and had just set it down. I asked if she knew the man. She hesitated, then said he was her brother. Not by blood, but by the years they'd spent growing up on the same block. She hadn't seen him in months. This morning, she'd come to the park because she'd gotten a message, no name, no number, telling her to meet at the fallen tree. She hadn't expected to find the body. She hadn't expected to see him again. Mitchell loaded the duffel into the evidence van. The rookie packed up his kit, his face pale from more than the cold. The patrol cars pulled away with the man in the back seat, fog swallowing their taillights. The park felt empty again, the way it had before all this started. The frost still glistened under the weak daylight. The oak still lay across the path, roots frozen in mid-reach. And somewhere, deep under the ice of that morning, were all the things we hadn't heard yet, the reasons, the details, the whole truth. But for now, the case was closed. As I walked away, the girl and her dog disappeared into the mist.